Most people think manipulation looks dramatic. They imagine someone shouting, threatening, lying in a way that is easy to detect, or trying to control every part of your life. But the most effective manipulation is usually much quieter than that. It often sounds like concern. It sounds like disappointment. It sounds like, "I just thought you were different." It sounds like, "After everything I have done for you." It sounds like, "You are being selfish." And because it does not always look like abuse, pressure, or obvious control, you start questioning yourself before you question the person applying the pressure. That is where manipulation begins. Not when someone else becomes powerful, but when your own emotions become predictable. Because a manipulative person does not need to overpower you if they can study what makes you uncomfortable. If guilt makes you move, they will use guilt. If silence makes you panic, they will go cold. If disapproval makes you explain yourself, they will act disappointed. If conflict scares you, they will create tension until you surrender. And if being misunderstood feels unbearable to you, they will accuse you of being something you are not, just to watch you rush to prove your innocence. This video is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It is not about becoming cold, paranoid, or impossible to connect with. It is about learning where your emotional doors are. Because the people who manipulate you usually do not enter through your weaknesses alone. They enter through your best qualities, your kindness, your empathy, your desire to be fair, your need to keep peace, your willingness to forgive. Those are not bad qualities. But without boundaries, good qualities become handles that other people can grab. So here are 6 signs you are easier to manipulate than you realize. And the last one may be the most important, because it explains why the same type of person keeps coming back into your life with a different name. Sign number 1. You feel guilty for having boundaries. A boundary is not an attack. It is not a punishment. It is not you being difficult. A boundary is simply a line that tells people where your peace, time, body, money, energy, and attention are no longer available. But if you are easy to manipulate, boundaries do not feel normal to you. They feel cruel. You say no, and immediately your mind starts building a courtroom against you. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have explained more. Maybe they needed me. Maybe I am becoming selfish. Maybe I will lose them. So instead of protecting your boundary, you start apologizing for having one. And that is exactly what a manipulative person notices. They learn that your no is not really a decision. It is just the beginning of a negotiation. They do not need to respect your line. They only need to make you feel bad for drawing it. So they sigh. They look hurt. They say, "Wow, I did not expect that from you." They remind you of a favor they once did. They bring up your past mistakes. They compare you to someone more available, more generous, more obedient. And because you do not want to feel like a bad person, you move the boundary. Not because you changed your mind, but because you could not tolerate the guilt. This is how guilt becomes a leash. A healthy person may feel disappointed by your boundary, but they do not punish you for it. They may not like your no, but they do not try to turn your no into proof that you are selfish. A manipulative person does something different. They make your boundary feel like betrayal. They make self-protection feel like cruelty. They make you feel responsible for emotions they refuse to manage themselves. And the moment you accept that responsibility, you become easier to control. The practical rule is simple. When you set a boundary, do not judge the boundary by how comfortable it feels. Most new boundaries feel uncomfortable, especially if you were trained to be agreeable. Judge the boundary by whether it protects something important: your time, your attention, your values, your emotional stability, your future. If the boundary protects something real, then guilt is not proof you are wrong. It may only be proof that you are doing something new. Sign number 2, you over-explain simple decisions. There is a difference between explaining and defending. Explaining is when you give someone useful context. Defending is when you keep talking because you are trying to earn permission to choose what you have already chosen. Manipulative people love over-explainers because every extra sentence gives them another place to push. You say, "I cannot come tonight." That is clear. But then you add, "I have been tired lately, and I have work tomorrow. And I also promised myself I would rest. And honestly, I have just had a lot going on." Now they have material. They can say, "Everyone is tired." They can say, "You always use work as an excuse." They can say, "Just come for 1 hour." They can say, "You are acting like you are the only person with problems." The more you explain, the more they can cross-examine you. And suddenly, a simple decision becomes a debate. This happens because you are not only communicating a choice, you are trying to be understood. You want them to see that your reason is reasonable. You want them to agree that your no makes sense. You want them to still think you are kind, fair, loyal, and good. But here is the hard truth. Some people do not need more information. They need more access. They are not confused by your boundary. They dislike it. So no amount of explanation will satisfy them, because understanding was never the goal. Control was. This is why short sentences feel dangerous when you are easy to manipulate. I cannot do that. That does not work for me. I am not available. I have decided not to. These sentences feel too bare, too final, too exposed. You feel the urge to decorate them with reasons so the other person does not dislike you. But the people who respect you do not need a paragraph, and the people who do not respect you will use the paragraph against you. This does not mean you should become rude or mysterious. It means you should learn the power of a complete sentence. A complete sentence does not need to be aggressive. It can be calm, warm, respectful, but final. Thanks for inviting me, but I cannot make it. I understand why you are asking, but I am not able to help with that. I hear you, but my decision is the same. Notice what these sentences do. They acknowledge the person without surrendering the choice. They do not give 10 doors for the other person to enter. They give one answer. If you want to become harder to manipulate, stop treating every decision like an essay question. Some decisions only need a period. Sign number 3. You confuse intensity with sincerity. Manipulative people often understand something very important about human nature. Intensity feels like truth. When someone speaks with enough emotion, urgency, pain, passion, or certainty, it can make you feel like they must be honest. They cry, so you assume they care. They get angry, so you assume the issue is serious. They pressure you quickly, so you assume there is no time to think. They tell you they have never felt this way before, so you assume the connection is special. They make everything feel dramatic, and drama tricks your nervous system into believing something important is happening. But intensity is not the same as sincerity. A person can be emotional and still be manipulative. A person can sound wounded and still be unfair. A person can cry and still avoid accountability. A person can speak with confidence and still be lying. A person can act urgent because they know urgency weakens your judgment. This is one of the most dangerous signs because many people who are easy to manipulate are emotionally responsive. They are sensitive to tone. They notice facial expressions. They feel other people's moods quickly. They do not like emotional chaos. So when someone brings a storm into the room, they try to calm the storm by giving the person what they want. The manipulator learns this. They learn that if they stay calm, you might think clearly. But if they raise the emotional temperature, you start reacting instead of choosing. So they create urgency. They make the decision feel immediate. They say, I need to know right now. They say, if you cared, you would not need time. They say, you are ruining everything. They say, I cannot believe you are doing this to me. Now you are not thinking about whether the request is fair. You are thinking about how to stop the emotional pressure. That is the trap. Manipulation often works by moving you from principle into panic. From, what do I believe? To, how do I make this stop? The antidote is delay. Delay is one of the most underrated forms of power. When someone is pressuring you, say, I need time to think. If they punish you for needing time, that is information. If they say, no, you have to decide now, that is information. If they get more intense when you slow down, that is information. Healthy people can tolerate your clarity process. Manipulative people often cannot, because their advantage depends on speed. They want you to answer before your wisdom comes back online. So when the emotion is high, slow the moment down. Do not match the intensity. Do not rescue the mood. Do not make a permanent decision inside someone else's emotional storm. Give yourself space, because sincerity survives time. Manipulation often depends on urgency. Sign number 4. You need people to understand your intentions. This sign is subtle. It usually appears in people who care deeply about being fair, kind, and morally correct. You do not just want to do the right thing. You want people to know you are trying to do the right thing. So when someone accuses you of being selfish, uncaring, disloyal, arrogant, cold, or ungrateful, something inside you panics. You cannot leave the accusation unanswered. You rush to explain. You send long messages. You replay every detail. You try to prove that your heart was clean. You think, if they just understand what I meant, this will be okay. But manipulative people exploit exactly that. They do not always accuse you because they believe the accusation. They accuse you because they know you will abandon your position to defend your identity. You said no. They call you selfish. Now the conversation is no longer about your boundary. It is about whether you are selfish. You asked for respect. They call you dramatic. Now the conversation is no longer about their behavior. It is about whether you are overreacting. You question something that felt wrong. They call you insecure. Now the conversation is no longer about the facts. It is about your character. This is called shifting the frame. The original issue disappears, and you are pulled into defending yourself. If you are easy to manipulate, You take the bait. You try to win a trial that the other person created. But the trial was never fair. The purpose was not truth. The purpose was distraction. Here is the rule. Do not leave the main issue to defend against every emotional accusation. You can say, you can see it that way, but my decision remains the same. You can say, I am not going to argue about my character. I am talking about what happened. You can say, calling me selfish does not change my boundary. You can say, we can discuss the issue respectfully, or we can pause this conversation. This feels uncomfortable because you are letting someone misunderstand you, but emotional maturity includes the ability to survive being misunderstood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Not everyone deserves a full explanation of your heart. Some people are not listening for truth. They are listening for weakness. If you know your intention and your behavior is aligned with your values, you do not need to keep auditioning for someone else's approval. Let your actions be clear over time, and let manipulative people be disappointed when their accusations stop working. Sign number 5. You ignore discomfort to avoid conflict. Your body often notices manipulation before your mind is ready to admit it. You feel tightness in your chest. Your stomach drops. Your jaw locks. You feel drained after certain conversations. You feel nervous before replying to a certain person. You feel relieved when their name disappears from your screen. But instead of listening to that discomfort, you explain it away. Maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe they did not mean it. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I should be more understanding. Maybe I just need to be patient. And sometimes, yes, discomfort can come from your own insecurity. Not every uncomfortable feeling means someone is manipulating you. But if your discomfort appears repeatedly around the same person, in the same pattern, after the same type of pressure, you should pay attention. Manipulation often creates confusion. A person says they care about you, but you feel smaller around them. They say they respect you, but they keep testing your limits. They say they are only joking, but the joke always lowers your confidence. They say they want honesty, but they punish you when you tell the truth. They say you can say no, but every no leads to tension. Your mind gets trapped in their words. Your body reacts to their pattern. Many people ignore this because they are afraid of conflict. They would rather betray their own discomfort than create an uncomfortable conversation. So they smile when they are annoyed. They say yes when their body is saying no. They keep the peace outside while building resentment inside. This is how you become easy to manipulate. Not because you do not notice, but because you notice and then abandon yourself. A manipulative person does not need you to be blind forever. They only need you to doubt your own signals long enough to keep giving them access. So practice asking a better question. Not, can I prove they are manipulating me? Ask, how do I consistently feel after interacting with this person? Do I feel calm or confused? Respected or pressured? Clear or guilty? Expanded or reduced? Free or managed? Your body is not the final judge, but it is a witness. Stop dismissing the witness. Sometimes the first act of self-respect is not confronting the person. It is admitting to yourself, something about this pattern is not right. Once you admit that, you can slow down. You can observe. You can create distance. You can stop handing out access automatically. Conflict avoidance feels safe in the moment. But long-term, it teaches people that your peace is available for trade. Sign number 6. You give second chances without changed behavior. This is the sign that keeps many people trapped for years. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they confuse forgiveness with access. You can forgive someone internally and still not give them the same position in your life. You can release bitterness and still change the relationship. You can understand why someone acted the way they did and still decide they are not safe with your trust. But if you are easy to manipulate, an apology resets everything. They hurt you. They apologize. They cry. They promise. They say they were stressed. They say they did not mean it. They say they are working on themselves. And because you want to believe in people, you reopen the door. Not slowly, not with evidence, not with new standards. You reopen it fully. Then the same behavior returns. Maybe not immediately. Maybe after a few calm weeks. Maybe after they feel secure again. Maybe after they sense that you are emotionally invested. And then the cycle repeats. Violation, apology, hope, access. Violation, apology, hope, access. This cycle survives because you are measuring words instead of patterns. A manipulative person may be very good at the apology stage. They know what to say when they are about to lose access. They suddenly become reflective. They suddenly understand your pain. They suddenly use the vocabulary you were begging them to understand months ago. And because the apology sounds like growth, you confuse it with change. But apology is not change. Emotion is not change. Potential is not change. A deep conversation at midnight is not change. Change is repeated behavior under normal conditions. Change is what they do after the fear of losing you has faded. Change is what they do when they are frustrated, tempted, stressed, embarrassed, or not getting their way. That is where character reveals itself. So here's the rule. Do not give full access back to someone because they apologized. Give access back slowly, based on consistent changed behavior over time. You can say, I appreciate the apology, but I need to see different behavior before things go back to normal. You can say, I am not punishing you. I am adjusting my trust based on what happened. You can say, I forgive you, but I am not ready to give you the same access. A manipulative person will often hate this, because they want forgiveness to erase consequences. They want your kindness to become a shortcut back to control. But consequences are not cruelty. They are how reality teaches respect. If someone repeatedly crosses a line and still receives the same access, the line is not real to them. This is why second chances require structure. Not just emotion, not just hope, not just, I feel like they mean it this time. A second chance should come with observation. What changed? What did they take responsibility for without blaming you? What specific behavior are they correcting? What happens when you say no again? What happens when you do not comfort them immediately? What happens when the relationship no longer revolves around their feelings? That is how you know whether the change is real. Manipulation becomes harder when access has to be earned, not emotionally demanded. Now, after these 6 signs, the question is not, how do I never get manipulated again? That is not realistic. Everyone can be influenced. Everyone can be fooled under the right conditions. Everyone has emotional weak points. The real question is, can I become less predictable? Because manipulation depends on predictability. If someone knows guilt always moves you, guilt becomes their tool. If they know silence makes you chase, silence becomes their tool. If they know accusation makes you explain, accusation becomes their tool. If they know intensity makes you panic, intensity becomes their tool. If they know apology resets the relationship, apology becomes their tool. So the goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to stop letting every emotion become an instruction. Guilt can appear without you obeying it. Fear can appear without you surrendering. Discomfort can appear without you running from conflict. Love can exist without unlimited access. Empathy can exist without self-abandonment. Here's a simple framework you can use. Pause. Name the pressure. Refuse the bait. Watch the behavior. Pause means you do not answer while your nervous system is activated. You create space before responding. Name the pressure means you silently identify what is being used. Is this guilt, urgency, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of conflict? Refuse the bait means you stay with the main issue. You do not chase every accusation. You do not over-explain. You do not rescue someone from the consequences of their own pressure. Watch the behavior means you stop being hypnotized by words. You look at patterns, because patterns tell the truth longer than promises do. And as you practice this, something important happens. You may lose some people, not necessarily because you did anything wrong, but because the version of you they preferred was easier to control. They liked the version that said yes quickly, the version that apologized first, the version that explained for hours, the version that forgave without change, the version that kept peace by swallowing discomfort. When that version starts disappearing, some people will call it arrogance. They will say you changed. They will say you are cold. They will say you think you are better now. But sometimes when people say, you changed, what they really mean is, you became harder to use. That is not a tragedy. That is growth. Becoming harder to manipulate does not mean becoming hard-hearted. It means becoming clear. It means your kindness now has structure. Your empathy now has limits. Your forgiveness now has wisdom. Your love now includes self-respect. And your peace is no longer something people can buy with guilt, pressure, intensity, or apology. So if you recognized yourself in these signs, do not shame yourself. Many people became easy to manipulate because they were trained to survive by being agreeable. They learned to read the room. They learned to keep others calm. They learned to avoid disappointment. They learned to explain themselves before being accused. At some point, those habits may have protected you, but now they may be costing you. The next stage of your life requires a different skill, not suspicion, not bitterness, not emotional shutdown. Discernment, the ability to see pressure without obeying it, the ability to feel guilt without surrendering your boundary, the ability to hear an accusation without abandoning the truth, the ability to forgive without giving unsafe people the same access. That is how you take your power back, quietly, clearly, and permanently. If this made you think of a pattern in your own life, pay attention to that. Your mind may already know where the next boundary belongs.